May the words that are heard be thine and not mine. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. From our Old Testament lection, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, "Come, go down to the potter's house, and there I will let you hear my words." So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was working at his wheel. The vessel he was making of clay was spoiled in the potter's hand, and he reworked it into another vessel, as seemed good to him. The potter's hand. This passage reminds me of my Southern Baptist upbringing, and frequently played hymn during the invitation time was "Have Thine Own Way, Lord." Anybody familiar with that one? Okay, good. The first verse is, "Have Thine own way, Lord, have Thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after Thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still." Have Thine own way. Wow, what a concept. God having complete control of us, our lives, our direction, really? The concept seems palatable when you're referring to someone else, or maybe the inanimate clay, but for me, really? Yikes. Do we actually believe in lordship to this degree? Have Thine own way, Lord? It requires trust and rapport and confidence in a higher, more capable source to allow surrender of that level and degree. What it requires is faith and commitment and trust. Trust. Our collect today, that I read at the wrong time, suggests that the opposite of trust is not doubt or disbelief, as we often think of it. The opposite of trust is pride. Pride. Now there's a word with which we may all relate. The factor preventing lordship in our lives and thus hindering us from becoming what we could be is pride. This is especially true of us in our modern Western mindset, Americans who are ruggedly independent. Unfortunately, it requires something catastrophic like a disease or a loss or, let's say, like a hurricane named Dorian, to force us to look forward rather than inward for all of our help. In our vast wealth, it is simply too easy just to go it alone with all the important stuff and only look to God for matters where we don't have any real skin in the game. So why would we trust God? Why? Well, Jeremiah suggests that Israel might trust God first due to God's master craftsmanship and the fact that he was going to smash them if they didn't. For today's purposes, we focus on God's expertise at molding us, forming us, creating us into beautiful pieces of art. I likened it to playing with Play-Doh this morning when I was talking with the children during the children's sermon. Did you catch that part about God using the same clay that once was spoiled and then reworking it into something new, something different, something good? And this is beyond just reduce, reuse, recycle. This is something that is in itself of quality and value and isn't defined by what it once was. Now that sounds like something we can believe in. Our psalm implies that God is trustworthy because God knows us more extensively, intimately than we even know ourselves. God knows the original design. You see, God has the blueprint. God knows the intent. The Creator has known us longer, and none is wiser, fashioning us even before, beyond our own ability to manage and fashion ourselves. Sounds believable. Philemon is an interesting and paradoxical epistle. A little backdrop explains what's going on with Paul's plea to his fellow friend. Onesimus was a slave. Back in the day, that was serious business. For some reason, he had not been with his master. I don't know if he ran off, or, he broke free, or if he was on assignment instead of gone too long, or he said, I was going back. But, it's different than the modern concept of slavery. Anyway, this guy would have been a trusted servant in the household. Would have been, it's not kind of the idea of like shackled up in chains and that kind of stuff. He would have been kind of like the manager of the estate. So he was very, very valuable as well. Well, for some reason, either he has escaped and now is seeking asylum with Paul, or he has gone to Paul and has told him that I need your help. I ran away, but the grass isn't greener on the other side, and now I want to go back. And he says, you are good friends with Philemon, and now if I go back with yours, I don't know, blessing, he won't put the hand up, which was far within the reason of the law then. They had completely thrown the boat. If he would have just been captured and taken back, most likely he would have been dead. The only other reason we can think of is that maybe Paul knew him and knew what value he was, and he just kind of wanted it for himself. But regardless, we've got this guy, it's Onesimus, and he is property of Philemon. And Paul's kind of in between and trying to mediate. Now, sometime other than this, let's talk more about Philemon and the very, alarming and scary position that this suggests about slavery in the first place. But tonight, for our purposes, we should discuss the text relative to the focus on trust. And Paul conveys to Philemon about Onesimus that God's interest is far beyond our social status or our position in life. How does that relate to us today? God's value of us and the trust that we have then in God is not based on our checkbooks or the title of our position that's on the office door or the neighborhood where we live or how well we dress or the cars we drive or the team we pull for or whatever. It's based on something else. And thanks be to God. Believing this is emancipating in its own sense. Well, finally, in Luke, Jesus admonishes us to count the costs and consider the expense of becoming a follower. And he uses this very radical language, kind of shocking language, like you can't love your family, you got to, your children, everything, you got to hate them. Now, the word there would have been more like choose one rather than the other one. We don't really have a good word in English to translate that Greek term. But the idea is that you've got to just, turn your back to all that. And just leave it behind if you're going to follow Christ. Lordship then means that we lose everything so that we might discover all. We can trust Christ, for he has already counted those costs and has paid the highest expense. All of it worth the realization of the end result in keeping with the bigger picture, and that is unbelievable. With all these arguments understood, Jeremiah, the psalmist, Paul, Jesus, they all prove trust to be evident. We can trust God with the entirety of our lives, for it is the master craftsman who seeks to shape us and mold us and form us more and more into the image of God. until we find our rest in thee. So, have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Hold over my being absolute sway, filled with thy Spirit, till all can see Christ only, always living in me. Amen.